Welcome to Trial to Triumph, hosted by Caleb Johnson, the show about leaning into life's constant testing on your way to realizing your biggest blessings.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Caleb Johnson, host of From Trial to Triumph, and today our guest is Cary Newton. So, Cary, welcome to the show.
Excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Cary, can you go ahead and give our listeners just a quick background story about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'll go back to where it started in real estate. My grandfather had actually owned a couple shopping centers, and as a kid, I would go with him to pick up some rent checks. Actually, back in those days, this was probably late 80s, early 90s. He was actually out there helping. He put a barber shop in one of his suites, and he would help him build it out. So I got to experience what the people side of the business was like, if you will. Unfortunately, he had passed as I was still in high school, but I always knew Grandpa had money. I didn't know how much, but I knew it was all from real estate, so I knew eventually I wanted to get into it. And then in college, I had a friend whose dad owned a bunch of multifamily units. I think at the time he had 100, and 95 of them were free and clear.
Wow.
So I was just sitting there doing the math, how much he might be collecting for rent. And I was like, man, this guy pulls almost $1 million a year down, free and clear. I said, you know what, this is something I think I want to do. So I had a lot of interest in it in college. And then right out of college, I got into brokerage. So I was actually on the retail side. I was selling and leasing shopping centers. But then I had an opportunity to go start a company with my cousin and took that. But during that time, I constantly stayed into the multifamily space. I had a goal once I was in college of buying one property a year. So I was in college, I bought my first duplex. I had no idea what I was doing. All I knew is that it cash flowed. I collected checks, I had a few bills, and I had a little bit of money left over at the end of each month. So I kept doing that, and then as I started making money in the corporate world, then podcasts started coming out, Bigger Pockets got pretty big, and really dived into the education side of multifamily. So I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago is when I really got started down the path of value add, where we'd buy properties, go in, completely gut them, rehab them, bring them up to what the high end of the market rents would be for those type of properties. And so really learned how to create value and had a lot of fun with that. So here, I'd say, about not a little bit less than a year ago, I turned this into a full-time job.
Nice, man. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, I know that's a lot of people's goal is to make real estate their full-time gig. And you also left out a piece a little bit about the company you created, and I know that's a really big part of your background. And so I'd like to just learn a little bit more about that and share that with the listeners. So really, how large was that company? Where was it based out of? And what did you guys do there?
Yeah, so it's a company called Footprint, actually based in Gilbert, Arizona here. Started with myself, my cousin, and 2 other guys. And actually started it, we had a plastic table from Costco that the 4 of us sat around when we first started this thing. Nice. But quickly scaled. We had a product that was kind of right place, right time, where we took people out of plastic food packaging and put them into a paper-based packaging that degraded or composted within 90 days. So really from an environmental standpoint, it hit a lot of these major Fortune 100 companies' sustainability goals, and also it performed really, really well. Like most paper products do not. Most people think of like a to-go tray that you get in a restaurant. By the time you get home, it leaks through. We actually had a kind of our secret sauce, I'll call it, that allowed it to perform like a plastic, but it still degraded like paper.
Wow.
So we took that from 4 people in about a 4-year period, grew it to 3,000 people, opened up 3 factories across the globe. And Mexicali was our biggest one. We had about 1.5 million square feet of factory there. So scaled pretty quickly and had a blast doing it. A lot of work as a startup, and startups can wear you out, that's for sure.
Hi, my friend, Caleb Johnson here, and I have a huge question to ask you real estate investors. How would you rate your personal discipline on a scale of 1 to 10? If your answer is anything less than a 10, I have something neat for you. And let me tell you, discipline means pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone and doing things that are difficult and sometimes boring. Achieving massive success requires you to do those difficult things. Now, I just released a program for investors where I walk with you as an accountability coach to help you stay on track, and I'm doing this for free. That's right, for free. But I'm only offering this to the first 5 people who sign up because I don't have availability for more than that. Starting is easy. Go to redcapitalgroup.com and click accountability coaching at the top right of the screen. So let's get to work, and now to the interview. Yeah. And on the engineering side of that, I'm sure I'm just trying to envision how you came up with a product like that. So is someone on your team like a bioengineer or something like that? Like, how'd you guys come up with that?
Yeah, we actually had quite a few PhD chemists on staff too, and their sole goal was to create, how do you get paper to work in environments it's never gone before? So we had categories like a frozen food category, quick service restaurant category, a dairy category, of which, if you were to put a frozen food bowl in a microwave and try to microwave it, it's going to leak and create a mess within seconds. Our biggest customer there was Conagra, and you could put their microwave or their bowl in the microwave for 6 minutes. It wouldn't leak through. It would come out. It'd be cooler to the touch. When you put a plastic tray in the microwave, it off-gases harsh carcinogens that causes cancer. And so that's becoming a huge issue in the marketplace. And so that's where I kind of say right place, right time, and that's why we grew so fast. We had these big-name customers. But yeah, that team's goal was, creating products like that that you couldn't find anywhere else. It doesn't exist anywhere else. And if it did, it has some type of plastic in it. Whether that's 5%, 10%, and ours was 100% plastic free. So it met a lot of legislation too in like the coastal communities in California, especially in Europe, as we were starting to expand in Europe quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. What was the big driving force for you guys to grow to that large of a company that quickly?
One, the demand was there. I think from other companies that I've been a part of, it is rare that you get the number 1 or number 2 customer within that category in every segment of our business. So one, the demand was there. 2, we also had a CEO that had an appetite for growth more than anybody I've ever seen. And so he was also able to raise a substantial amount of money to fund that growth. I think he raised over $700 million in just a couple of years.
Wow.
To keep expanding Mexico, to keep expanding Europe, to keep expanding our research and development. When most of our competitors in the space were $5 and $10 million companies, they didn't invest in the R&D. They were more considered packaging companies, and we were truly a technology company.
Okay. Now, I do capital raising myself for offerings, properties in the Midwest and Southeast. And so if I had the capabilities to raise $700 million, a lot of my problems would go away. So
all of our problems would go away, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so is there any insight or maybe advice that you can give? It doesn't sound like you are doing the capital raising really, or the most of it, but do you have any maybe advice on that side of things about how to raise capital like that?
It became his full-time job. It was our CEO that did it.
Mm-hmm.
It became his full-time job. That's all he did. One, he was probably the best I've ever seen at doing it. But 2, you also had, with that customer demand, when our customers are, I guess it's public knowledge so I could say it, but the customers were McDonald's number 1 in the quick service category, Conagra's number 1 or 2 in the frozen food category. In each of those categories, you have those, and they commit to these major roadmaps because they have legislation they have to get out of plastic, especially in Europe. So when you're able to go show investors and say, look, here's these customer contracts we have. We already had those in place. I led the sales team that did that. It was really easy to go get that money at that point in time. I shouldn't say really easy. That's probably understating what he was able to do. But that helps. And that was a tremendous advantage that a lot of these other companies just didn't have. They didn't have that customer demand.
Mm-hmm. So what was one thing that you said, if you learned one thing from him, or maybe there was one thing that he did really, really well, what would you say that is?
Rallying people. Being able to get people behind one cause, one mission. He comes from playing sports, and I think there's a part of that plays in the business world that he like some of the major sports athletes or superstars, I should say, can rally a team behind one mission, and we had a mission to eliminate single-use plastic and to create that excitement where people came in each day ready to go, and you'd be shocked by just creating that environment how many more hours you can get out of people to work, or how much more diligent or efficient they would be in their work because they had a greater sense of urgency behind it besides just punching the clock.
Right.
And so then when investors would come in the buildings or board members would come in the building, they see it, they could feel it. You could literally feel the energy as you'd walk in. And that was something that he created, and everyone followed suit, and it was a very easy mission to get behind. You go to some of these beach cleanups, and you try to take out these plastic bottle caps out of the sand, and you remove one, and there's two more right below it. And at some point, you do enough of those, it starts pissing you off. And so that's where he leveraged that as a part of our mission to do better for the planet.
Wow, I love that. And Cary, growing a company to that size, 3,000 people, that's a lot of people. And so I don't think a lot of us have gone through that and experienced that. And so what were some of the challenges that you guys and your team had to overcome and really learn and just grow through with that kind of growth?
People, period. People are hard. It can be really hard, right? You got a lot of mix of personalities. During the middle of that too, COVID hit. So then you're trying to, and we grew substantially during COVID. So how do you grow this many people that quickly during a time where you can't meet face to face? You can't do team buildings. You can't do company outings. That was a challenge. I think even getting back into the office, trying to get back into that groove, it was hard. It was hard to regain that energy of what you once felt in the building, even for the people that had been there from the start. I had a client say to me at one point in time, business is easy, people are hard. Mm-hmm. And it's so true. And so, we went through a little bit of turnover after COVID. You get back to the office, and you mix a lot of these personalities, a lot of these different backgrounds, a lot of these people that didn't start with a company. Having a startup and then going into an established company are two totally different things. And a lot of the people that came in after COVID were kind of coming into a more of an established company, but they might have been missing some of the grit that it took to get it to that level where you still had a lot of people in the company that started it, a little bit of a clash of personalities, if you will. And so spending a lot more time and diligence in either maybe they're not the right fit and cutting quicker, or they're the right fit. Let's work with them. Let's build them. Let's elevate their not necessarily their performance, but their team behavior, if you will. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And Cary, I know you're doing real estate full time, so there must have been something that attracted you more to real estate than the big corporate job. And so, what was really the reason that you decided to put that to the wayside?
There were a couple, but I'd say the main reason is my kids. I have 4 kids. I got a range from 19, 16, and then I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And as I'm getting a little older now, I want to spend as much time as possible with them. And so, especially with the little ones, once they get into the my teenage kids' years, they get their car, they got their friends, they're off running, having a good time. You don't have as much time as you think. And so this was my way to say, hey, I was traveling a ton. I was running Europe. I was over in Europe a lot, and I was super fortunate to bring my family with them. I got to bring my parents on trip, my sister and her family on trips, which I probably wouldn't have been able to do if I was not in that role. But it also took me away a lot. And so this allowed me, I was fortunate enough to keep investing as I was going, and that has now carried me through this time to say, it's time to slow down. It's time to enjoy my kids' time now more than ever. And so that, to me, that was more important at this stage of my life.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And so many people, they do get caught up in the quick, I want to start a huge company and I want to be big. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes that can just be ego, for some people.
For sure.
And they just want to have this big company and they can actually leave their family by the wayside. And then 15 years down the road, yeah, they have this Fortune 500 company, but they've been divorced twice now. Their kids hate them. They never talk to them. And I think really it's so important to start off with, what's your end goal? Like if you were 60 years old or 70 years old and looking back on your life and saying, I'm really glad that I did that. I spent more time with my wife. I spent more time with my kids, my mom, my dad, and building a framework and a goal around that, like what you want to look at when you look back on your life. I think that's going to help people get a lot more satisfaction compared to making a quick decision just to grow this big empire that will ultimately demand a lot.
Well, and I think that's the thing that gets missed is what it demands. There are many nights or many days, I should say. The average is 12 hours plus. So it's not, if you're going to try to be that big, an 8-hour day doesn't exist. So something's got to give somewhere. And it goes back to what you just said of what's important to you. And at some point that became, I don't want to say too much, it just wasn't the priority anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And I also know at the same time, sometimes if someone's 25 years old or 22, they're single, no kids, and they're living on their own, then maybe that is the perfect time to do something like that, right? And experience that.
Especially if you fail. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
If you fail during that time, it's the best time to recover too, because you have a substantial amount of time to recover. You don't have life pulling at you. You don't have kids pulling at you or your wife pulling at you, your girlfriend. You can try. You can do the things you need to do and work those hours to get where your ultimate end goal is. But once life starts happening, you get a little bit older, man. Something's got to give somewhere.
Right. And then I know we talked a lot about that, but I want to one more thing on that growth. On your side, Cary, what would you say is the most important thing that you learned through that entire process?
There's quite a bit.
Could be a couple things.
Yeah, one I'd go back to, when you first start, you're just trying to scratch and claw and get any type of business you can just to survive, right? And a lot of times in the startup, the first couple years is all survival mode. I mean, I remember many days where you're looking at, man, are we going to make payroll this month? Or are we gonna keep the lights on this month? And so those days are hard, and you're trying to scratch and claw. So from a sales and business standpoint, those big whales we were chasing take a lot more time than you think. But same thing, and I'll relate it to real estate. The duplex, the fourplex is the same pain in the neck as a 30, 40, 50 unit building. Same thing on a customer end. They're the same pain in the neck. The dollars are just different. They demand the same. They require the same amount of attention. So from that standpoint, not having the fear of this is the biggest customer in this space, we got to be perfect as we go. That's not necessarily the case. So I think that'd be one of the bigger takeaways from that. Is it does take time. Plan for that time, but don't be afraid of that.
And Cary, whenever it comes to managing people, we talked about that a little bit, and I think I think we're all in the people business, right? Mm-hmm. We're always around people, and if you have poor people skills, then your business is going to suffer. And I know I've had conversations with a couple of people that, in the commercial industry, there's some people that are more on the capital raising side, and so they're in front of people all the time, and they naturally have those good God-given skills to connect with people. And on the other side, you have more of the introverts that just underwrite, and they can't tell when they just seriously offended somebody or not. They were just telling the truth, right? How they felt.
Right.
And so you have both sides, but how have you learned to effectively communicate with people and just develop strong relationships? Yeah,
we had a lot of similar things. We are a company predominantly of engineers, and so by just their natural being, there are a lot of introverts, and so when the customers who want to get on the phone with the design team, there could be some awkward moments within those conversations. But as managing my team, I always took it as the same approach as my kids. They're all different. I've learned over the years I can't treat or interact with my oldest the same way as I can my middle child, which is totally different than my youngest. And so really just taking the time to get to know them on a personal level, I think gets missed so much, especially as COVID happened. You're on a screen with somebody, you don't get a chance to sit down and have a sandwich with somebody, have a cup of coffee with somebody, and really just learn about them as a person. What makes them tick is completely different. If you got a team of 10, team of 20, they're all going to be different. And what makes them tick? Once you learn that, then you can really get the best out of people, or the things, if you're in the capital raising or property management side or whatever it is, then you know how to interact with them a little bit more. You can relate to them a little bit better. Then maybe you can see things a little bit from their perspective too. I think so much of it gets missed of it's all about the person on this side of the screen, and it's not. And once you can finally learn about it's not about you and what can I do and be that servant leader, if you will, then you can get more out of your team for sure. Or people.
Mm-hmm. And from my understanding, Cary, correct me if I'm wrong, but it comes down to asking questions of people, right? And so it's like sales. If you want to get the sale, if you want to close the deal, then you need to ask questions and actually understand what makes your client, your prospect, tick.
Yep.
And so asking those questions and understanding what the real why is, if I heard this example of if I ask you, Cary, okay, what do you want to do in real estate? Well, I want to own 100 units. Okay, Cary, if you had that 100 units, what would that mean to you? And then you can unpack that why and say, okay, I want to go travel with my family more. I want to spend more time with them. I want to do mission trips. I want to give back. Or maybe I just want to be selfish and I just want to hold on to money. But ultimately, when you ask those questions, that's when those real whys and those driving factors come out, from my understanding.
That's great. We were a solution-oriented team in sales. So we went in with customers and tried to understand their problems, and then we would build our solution, our packaging around those problems to solve those for the customer. And you can't go in talking a whole lot because then you're not going to learn what their problems are. So it's a lot of open-ended questions to get them talking, to get them speaking about their pain points, and then you have a different sell than somebody else. If you're just sitting there rattling off your product, first of all, no one cares. They only care about their problems and what they need to get going because they're judged a certain way, they're getting bonused a certain way, whatever that is. And if you don't understand those, you're not going to win. You're not going to get it done.
Exactly. I just listened to a couple books and they said the same thing, and it was every client, they're tuned into the radio station WIIFM, which is what's in it for me. Yeah. And so that's what your client wants, right? They don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill. They want a 1/4-inch hole. And so you're selling that drill, so you need to show them the benefits of that product.
Oh, that's so true. I remember early on we were so focused on trying to sell us as a company because we're so new. A lot of it in the beginning, smoke and mirrors, right? You try to act a little bigger than you really are, and you have more factory equipment and space than you really do. And then at some point, the switch turned to say, stop telling them all the things we've done and start trying to understand what they need. You try to do the things you've done to say, hey, believe me in what I'm telling you, I can really help you. But the reality is 10, 20 minutes later of talking about yourself, they've tuned out. They don't care anymore. They have another meeting to go to. You're on the clock and if you have a 30-minute meeting, they got 10 minutes left to tell you the problem. That's not enough. And so that changed as we went, but that was something, a key learning as well.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, find out what their need is and stop talking about yourself.
Yeah.
Wow, so good. Well, Cary, we're going to go ahead and wrap down, and I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. I know we pulled out a couple nuggets, and so I really appreciate your time and your being here, brother. Thank you.
This has been great. Thank you so much.
And Cary, so the first question would be is if you can recommend a book to our listeners, what would that be?
I'm gonna shift to a podcast. He also has a book. He has a couple courses. his name's Axel. I'm going to draw a blank on his last name. He's got a multifamily wealth podcast, but he has a course that I bought, I don't know, a little while back. But he really takes it from beginning to end. If you're trying to start out a real estate business and you're trying to go direct to seller on some of these things, I mean, he gives you the nuts and bolts of what you need to really build a plan, more so than just contacting brokers. So that was one that's really helped propel me beyond the bigger pockets, beyond the rich dad poor dad. That one really had a tactical view on how to approach it, and not only that, he gives you the actual tools. He'll give you actually if you're wanting to get into direct mail or emails or cold calls or text message or whatever, he actually gives you the scripts he uses. He does a really good job.
Okay. And is that the Multifamily Wealth Podcast with Axel Ragnarsson?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah,
Ragnarsson.
I know Axel.
That was the name I was looking for. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I thought that name sounded really familiar, and I had to look it up. So, and Cary, the second question is, if people want to learn more about you and maybe get in touch with you, where can they do that at?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the best place to go. I think you just search my name, Cary Newton, and you'll find me pretty easy. Also the website, arizonamultifamily.net.
Okay.
Reach out
and the last question is, if you can share one final thing with our listeners that they can take away from today's show, what would that be?
I think from what we've done in the previous company to what I'm doing now in real estate, don't be afraid to grow. Don't be afraid to get out there and shoot. How we met was through a mutual banker. Develop those relationships, grow those relationships, nurture those relationships, because you never know where your next deal is going to come from. Whether that's the bank, I had a contractor bring me a deal, and it just so happens because we go out to lunch every now and then together to how's his business doing, how's my business doing, how can I help you in yours, and he does a lot of my turns for me, but you never know where that next deal is coming from.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Well, Cary, once again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time, and I know the listeners definitely appreciate it as well. So thanks again. And to everyone tuning in, appreciate your time, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
It's time to grab your victory. Find us on the web at redseacapitalgroup.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Red Sea Capital Group.